I moved to New York because I thought being surrounded by millions of people would make me feel safe. That was the first thing I learned was wrong. In a city that crowded, you can scream and still be alone. I was 29 when I moved into the apartment. It was a narrow one-bedroom in an old walk-up building, the kind with uneven floors, hissing radiators, and pipes that knocked at night like someone tapping from inside the walls. The rent was still too high, but compared to everything else I had looked at, it was a miracle. The place was small, but it had a bedroom, a real kitchen, and one window that faced the street. The other windows faced the air shaft. If you've never lived in an older New York apartment, the air shaft is basically a vertical concrete throat between buildings. It lets in a little light, a little air, and every private sound from every unit stacked around it. You hear coughing, arguments, alarms, dishes, toilets flushing, phone calls, crying, music, and footsteps that seem to come from nowhere. At first, I found it comforting. It made me feel like I was never really alone. Then I started hearing the apartment across the shaft. I couldn't see much of it. Their window was directly opposite my kitchen window, maybe 8 feet away, separated by the narrow drop between buildings. Their glass was cloudy, with an old beige curtain behind it. At night, when their light was on, I could see shadows moving behind the fabric. For the first 2 weeks, I barely noticed them. Then one night, around 2:40 in the morning, I woke up to 3 soft knocks. Not at my door, at my kitchen window. I lay in bed, frozen, listening. 3 more knocks. Tap, tap, tap. My bedroom door was open, and from where I was lying, I could see the faint rectangle of the kitchen window. It was dark, except for the gray glow of the city outside. I told myself it was a pipe, or a branch, except there were no trees anywhere near my 5th-floor kitchen window. Then came a scraping sound, slow, deliberate, like a fingernail dragging down glass. I got out of bed because I had to, not because I was brave, because the sound was too close to ignore. I walked into the kitchen and turned on the light. Nothing was there. Across the shaft, the opposite window was dark. I stood there for almost a minute, staring at the beige curtain. Then, just as I was about to turn away, the curtain moved, only slightly, like someone had been standing behind it and had stepped back. I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been nothing. New building noises, wind pressure, maybe someone closing a cabinet nearby. But over the next few nights, the knocking came back, always between 2:30 and 3 o'clock, always 3 taps, sometimes followed by that slow scrape. I started leaving my kitchen light on. It didn't help. If anything, it made the window feel more exposed, like I was putting myself on display for whoever might be watching from across the shaft. One night, I finally got irritated enough to knock back. 3 taps on my side of the glass. The response came immediately. 3 taps from across the shaft. My stomach dropped. I leaned close to the window and tried to see through the darkness. The other apartment's curtain was closed, but I could see a faint shape behind it. A head, still, facing me. I backed away so fast I hit the counter. Then the light in the opposite apartment clicked on. The silhouette disappeared. The curtain stayed closed. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then a hand pressed against the fabric from the other side. It was an adult hand, long fingers, palm flattened. It stayed there, perfectly still. Then one finger lifted and pointed directly at me. I shut my kitchen blind so hard the plastic cracked. The next day, I asked the building superintendent who lived in the apartment across from mine. He was in the lobby fixing the mailboxes, and when I described the window, he looked annoyed before I even finished. "Nobody," he said. I asked what he meant. He told me the unit across the shaft had been vacant for months. The previous tenant had left suddenly, and the apartment needed repairs. He said nobody was living there. I told him I had seen lights. He shrugged and said old buildings had electrical problems. I told him I had seen someone behind the curtain. That made him stop. He looked up at me then, but not like he didn't believe me, more like he didn't want me to keep talking. He said, "Don't open your window." That was all. Then he went back to the mailboxes. I should have pushed him for more. I should have asked what happened in that apartment, who the last tenant was, why he said that so quickly. Instead, I went upstairs and checked my kitchen window lock. It was locked. But the thing about those old windows is that locked doesn't always mean secure. The frame had been painted over so many times that the latch barely lined up. I took a chair and wedged it under the frame like that would somehow help. That night, I didn't hear knocking. I heard breathing. It came through the air shaft, soft at first, then closer, not through the walls, not from the hallway, from outside my kitchen window. I stood in the dark living room, staring toward the kitchen, listening to that slow, wet breathing echo between the brick walls. Then a voice whispered, "You're new." It was so quiet I almost convinced myself I hadn't heard it. Then it whispered again, "You're new." I didn't answer. The voice was male, older, hoarse, not yelling, not angry. That was what made it worse. It sounded calm, patient, like someone introducing himself. I grabbed my phone and called the police. By the time they arrived, the voice was gone. 2 officers came up to my apartment. They were polite but tired. I showed them the kitchen window. I pointed to the apartment across the shaft. One officer shined a flashlight through the glass and across the gap, but the opposite curtain just hung there, motionless. They asked if I had enemies. I said no. They asked if I lived alone. I said yes. They asked if the window opened. I said technically, but I never opened it. One of them told me not to engage if I heard anything again. The other told me to get a camera. Before they left, I asked if they could check the vacant apartment. They said they'd need access from the superintendent. The superintendent wasn't answering his phone, so they left. That was New York, I guess, unless someone was actively breaking in, bleeding, or blocking traffic. You were mostly expected to endure whatever strange thing was happening to you. The next day, I bought a small indoor camera and placed it on top of my fridge, aimed at the kitchen window. It recorded motion and sound. I felt stupid setting it up, but that night I slept better knowing it was there. At 2:51 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the camera app. At first, the kitchen looked empty. The blinds were closed. The chair was still wedged under the window frame. The timestamp counted upward in the corner. Then the blinds moved, not from inside, from behind them. Something thin slid between 2 slats, a piece of paper. It pushed through a gap I didn't even realize existed between the bottom of the window and the sill. The paper dropped onto my kitchen floor. I watched it happen live on my phone from my bed. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then the camera audio crackled. A whisper came through, "Read it." I turned on every light in the apartment before I went into the kitchen. The paper was folded once. It was old, yellowed, and damp around the edges. I didn't want to touch it, so I used tongs from a drawer and opened it on the counter. There were only 5 words written on it. "I can hear you breathe." I left the apartment that night. I didn't pack anything except my phone, wallet, and keys. I walked 15 blocks to an all-night diner and sat in a booth until sunrise with coffee I barely touched. In the morning, I called my landlord's office. They told me the superintendent would inspect the windows. I asked again about the apartment across the shaft. The person on the phone paused too long. Then she told me that unit was not part of my building. That was the first time I understood the layout. The air shaft separated my building from the building behind it. The window across from mine belonged to a different building entirely. Different entrance, different landlord, different superintendent. That meant my superintendent had lied when he said it was vacant. Or he had assumed I meant another unit. Or he knew exactly what I meant and wanted me to stop asking. I went to work that day exhausted. I worked in an office where no one cared why your hands shook as long as you answered emails. By noon, I had convinced myself to break my lease. By 3, I was looking up short-term rentals I couldn't afford. By 5, I was telling myself maybe I had overreacted. That's how these things happen. You normalize the impossible because moving is expensive. That evening when I got home, there was an envelope taped to my apartment door. No stamp, no name, just my apartment number written in black marker. Inside was a photograph. It showed me sleeping, taken from inside my bedroom. I nearly dropped it. The angle was from the foot of my bed, looking toward my face. My mouth was slightly open. One arm was outside the blanket. My bedroom lamp was off, but the photo had a faint greenish tint, like night vision. On the back, someone had written, "You sleep on your left side first, then you turn." I ran out into the hallway and started knocking on doors. Most people didn't answer. One woman cracked her door with the chain still on. I asked if she had seen anyone near my door. She said no. Another neighbor told me packages got stolen all the time and shut the door before I could explain. Finally, an older man from the unit below mine came upstairs because he heard me panicking. I showed him the photo. His face changed immediately. He told me to come inside his apartment. His place smelled like old books and coffee. He locked the door behind us and told me not to stand near the window. I asked him if he knew what was going on. He said, "You're not the first." He told me there had been another tenant in my apartment before me, a man in his 30s, quiet, worked nights sometimes. After a few months, he started complaining about someone watching him through the air shaft. Then he started saying someone was getting into his apartment. No forced entry, no missing valuables, just small things move around. A cup placed in the bathtub, shoes lined up facing the bed, notes left under pillows. The landlord acted like he was unstable. Then one morning, he was gone. Not dead, not officially missing, just gone. He broke his lease, left most of his furniture, and never came back. I asked about the apartment across the shaft. The neighbor shook his head. He said people in the building had talked about it for years. The rear building had apartments that were supposed to be empty, but lights came on at odd hours. Windows open when no one admitted living there. Maintenance workers avoided certain floors. A delivery person once claimed someone buzzed him into the rear building, but when he got upstairs, the apartment door was sealed with plastic sheeting from the outside. I asked why nobody did anything. He gave a tired laugh. "Do what? Call who?" "Tell him a shadow is bothering us." He made me tea I didn't drink. Before I left, he said one more thing. "Cover the vents too." I asked what vents. He pointed up. Old buildings have gaps everywhere. Pipe chases, shared ventilation, dumbwaiter shafts that got sealed decades ago but not completely, spaces behind cabinets, holes under sinks, places where one apartment breathes into another. I didn't go back to my apartment alone. I called a coworker. He was older than me, calm, practical, the kind of person who had lived in New York long enough to treat every crisis like an inconvenience. I told him someone had been inside my apartment. He came over with a flashlight, a screwdriver, and the confidence of someone who had not yet heard the whispering. We checked everything. The front door lock was intact. The windows were locked. The fire escape was on the street side, not the air shaft side. The closet was empty. Under the bed was empty. The kitchen cabinets were normal. Then he moved the refrigerator. Behind it was a rectangular panel in the wall, painted over, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. The screws had fresh scratches. My coworker looked at me and stopped joking. He used the screwdriver to remove the panel. Behind it was darkness. A narrow maintenance cavity ran behind the kitchen wall. Pipes went up and down through it. The space was too small for a normal person to walk through comfortably, but not too small to crawl. There was dust everywhere, except in the center. There, the dust had been wiped clean. Something had been moving through it. My co-worker called the police this time. When they came, they took it more seriously. The photo helped. So did the open wall panel. One officer looked into the cavity and said it probably connected to other units or an old service base. They told me to stay somewhere else until the landlord secured it. I asked if they could investigate the rear building. They said they would make a report. That phrase became my enemy. A report meant something had been written down. It did not mean someone was coming to save me. I stayed with my co-worker and his wife that night. They were kind, but I could tell they didn't want to get involved beyond giving me a couch for one evening. I didn't blame them. The next morning, the landlord sent a handyman, not a security professional, not a contractor, a handyman. He screwed a fresh metal plate over the panel behind the fridge and sealed the edges with expanding foam. He replaced the kitchen window latch and told me it was fine now. I asked if he had checked where the cavity led. He said, "Not my job." That night, I booked a cheap hotel. But before I left, I wanted clothes, my laptop, and the camera footage. I entered my apartment around 7 p.m. The hallway was normal. Someone was cooking onions. A dog barked downstairs. The city outside made its usual endless noise. Inside, my apartment looked untouched. The new metal plate behind the fridge was secure. The kitchen blinds were still shut. I packed quickly. Then I noticed my camera was turned around. It was no longer facing the kitchen window. It was facing my bedroom door. I checked the footage with trembling hands. The video showed my kitchen at 3:12 p.m. while I had been at work. For several minutes, nothing moved. Then the fridge shifted forward, just an inch at first. Then more. The metal plate behind it bent outward, not removed, bent, slowly. From behind, the foam seal tore apart in thin strings. The plate warped until one corner peeled loose from the wall. Then fingers appeared. They were dirty, with dark material under the nails. A hand squeezed through the gap. Then another. The person behind the wall did not come out fully. The opening was too small. Instead, they reached one arm into my kitchen and felt along the wall until they found the camera cord. The feed cut out for 11 minutes. When it came back, the camera had been turned toward the bedroom, and in the audio, very faintly, someone was laughing. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, breathy laugh from behind the wall. I left without my laptop. I didn't even close the door behind me. I went straight to the police station. This time, I didn't let anyone minimize it. I showed the photo. I showed the footage. I told them about the wall. I told them about the voice. I told them someone had been inside. They sent officers back with me. By the time we arrived, the apartment door was closed. I had left it open. The officers drew their flashlights and entered first. Nobody was inside, but my bedroom had changed. Every piece of furniture had been moved to face the bed, my desk chair, my nightstand, my small bookshelf. Even the mirror from the hallway had been placed at the foot of the bed, angled so that if I had been lying there, I would have been staring at my own reflection. On the bed was another note, written on the back of one of my utility bills. You brought people. One officer swore under his breath. They searched the apartment, then called for someone else. More officers came. They documented the wall panel. They checked the hallway. They spoke to neighbors. The older man from downstairs told them what he'd told me, but I could tell from their faces that old stories didn't mean much. What mattered was access. How was someone getting in? The answer came from the building inspector 2 days later. There was a sealed service corridor behind my kitchen wall. Decades ago, it had allowed access to pipes and maybe old ventilation systems between buildings. Renovations had blocked parts of it, but not all. Someone had opened sections from the rear building side and was using the connected cavities to reach apartments along the shaft. Not easily, not comfortably, but possible. The inspector said the person doing it would have to be thin, patient, and familiar with the building. That word stayed with me. Patient. The landlord agreed to move me to a different unit temporarily, but I didn't trust the building anymore. I stayed in hotels and on couches while trying to find a new place. It cost me money I didn't have. My work suffered. I stopped sleeping normally. For about a week, nothing happened. Then I received an email. It came from an address I didn't recognize. No subject, no message, just an attachment. The attachment was a photo of my hotel room door, taken from the hallway. I checked out within 10 minutes. I wish I could tell you the police caught him quickly. They didn't. The problem was that he never threatened me directly in a way that sounded specific enough. He never said he would hurt me. He never demanded money. He never used his real name. The buildings were old, records were messy, cameras were either broken or pointed the wrong way, and everyone who might have known something suddenly knew nothing. For the next month, I lived like an animal. I checked behind shower curtains. I taped hair across door frames before leaving rooms. I placed cups in front of doors at night. I slept with lights on. I stopped wearing headphones. Every reflection made me flinch. The worst part was that New York kept going. People shoved past me on sidewalks. Trains came and went. Restaurants filled. Sirens screamed. Couples laughed outside bars. Life continued at full volume while I quietly fell apart. Eventually, I found a room in an apartment far from that building. It was smaller, uglier, and more expensive, but it was on a high floor in a newer building with cameras, deadbolts, and windows that faced open sky. For a while, things got better. I changed my number. I deleted old accounts. I stopped using delivery apps. I told only a few people where I lived. Months passed. Then winter came. One night, during a heavy rainstorm, I woke up to a sound I hadn't heard in a long time. 3 soft taps. I sat up in bed, instantly awake. My new bedroom window faced the city. There was no air shaft, no opposite window within reach, no fire escape. I waited, barely breathing. 3 more taps, not from the window, from inside my closet. Tap, tap, tap. I stared at the closet door. It was shut. The room was dark except for the glow of my phone charging beside the bed. Rain hit the glass. A siren wailed somewhere far below. Then the closet door opened 1 inch. Slowly. I couldn't scream. A folded piece of paper slid out across the floor. The door stopped moving. I grabbed my phone and ran. I didn't look inside the closet. I didn't read the note. The worst part about working nights in New York wasn't the exhaustion. It was the commute home. During the day, the city feels crowded in a comforting way. Even if something bad happens, there are witnesses, noise, movement, life everywhere. At 2 in the morning, the city changes. The streets still have people, but they stop feeling connected to each other. Everyone moves quickly. Nobody makes eye contact. Every subway platform feels like a place where something already happened 10 minutes ago. I learned that after taking the last train home for almost a year. I worked security at a luxury apartment tower in Midtown, overnight shifts, 6 nights a week. The pay was decent, but by the time my shift ended, the subway system was mostly empty except for exhausted workers, drunk people, and the occasional person who looked like they had nowhere else to exist. Most nights were fine. Then I started seeing the man with the suitcase. The first time I noticed him, I was waiting alone on the downtown platform around 2:15 in the morning. The station was almost empty except for a couple arguing quietly near the stairs and a homeless man asleep across 3 seats. The tunnel air smelled like hot metal and rainwater. Somewhere far above, traffic rumbled through the street grates. I remember checking my phone and noticing there were service delays. Then I heard wheels. Not train wheels, suitcase wheels, slowly rolling across the platform. I looked up and saw him near the far end under a flickering light. Older adult male, thin, gray coat, dark gloves, pulling a large black suitcase behind him. At first, nothing seemed unusual except the time of night, but he wasn't waiting near the middle of the platform like everyone else. He stood directly beside the tunnel, close enough that one careless step would have sent him onto the tracks. The suitcase stood upright beside him. He wasn't moving, just staring into the tunnel. When the train arrived, everyone boarded except him. He stayed perfectly still as the train screamed into the station. Didn't even react to the wind. The doors opened. I got on. Right before the doors closed, I looked back through the window. He was staring directly at me. Not angry, not emotional at all. Just staring. The suitcase beside him tilted slightly forward like something inside had shifted its weight. Then the train pulled away. I forgot about him by the next day. New York forces you to ignore strange things. If you paid attention to every unsettling person you saw, you'd never sleep. But 3 nights later, I saw him again. Different station. Same suitcase. Same gray coat. Same stillness. This time there were fewer people around. Just me and a woman farther down the platform, listening to music through headphones. The man stood near the edge again, watching the tunnel, the suitcase upright beside him. I tried not to look at him, but it became impossible after a while. There was something unnatural about how motionless he was. Not stiff exactly, more like someone trying very hard to imitate a normal person standing casually. Then I noticed the suitcase. The handle was wet. Dark liquid glistened near the wheels. Not enough to pool on the floor, just enough to leave thin streaks behind where it rolled. I immediately told myself it was rainwater. It had been raining outside. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't rainwater. The train arrived. Again, he didn't board. Again, he watched me through the window as the train left. This time, though, I noticed something else. The suitcase moved. Just once. A tiny twitch. Like whatever was inside had adjusted position. I barely slept after that shift. The next night at work, I mentioned it to one of the doormen during lunch. He laughed and told me every overnight commuter eventually develops subway paranoia. He said the late-night trains make everyone think they're seeing serial killers. I laughed too, but after that conversation, I started paying attention to other commuters. That's when I realized something strange. People noticed the man, but nobody reacted to him. You'd think someone standing at the edge of the platform with a leaking suitcase at 2 a.m. would draw attention. Instead, people looked at him briefly, then looked away almost immediately, like their brains refused to engage with it. A week passed before I saw him again. This time changed everything. I boarded an almost empty train after work and sat alone in the middle car. I remember being relieved because I hadn't seen the suitcase man on the platform. Then at the next stop, the doors opened, and he walked into my car. For the first time, I heard the suitcase rolling close. The wheels made a soft, uneven clicking sound. Click, click, pause. Click, click, like one wheel was damaged. The man sat directly across from me. The suitcase remained upright between his knees. I pretended to look at my phone while watching him through the reflection in the train window. He smelled faintly chemical, like bleach trying to cover something worse. The car was almost empty except for a guy asleep near the doors and 2 women talking quietly at the opposite end. Nobody looked at him. Nobody looked at the suitcase. Then the train lights flickered. Just once. When they came back, the suitcase had fallen sideways. The zipper was partially open. I saw pale skin inside. Human skin. A hand. I froze instantly. The man calmly reached down and pulled the zipper closed again. Then he looked up at me. He knew I had seen it. I wanted to move. I wanted to stand up, run into another car, hit the emergency intercom, anything. But my body wouldn't cooperate. The train kept rattling through the tunnel, while the man stared at me without blinking. Then he smiled. Not wide, just enough to show acknowledgement, like we now shared a secret. At the next station, he stood up. The suitcase wheels clicked behind him as he exited the train. Before the doors closed, he turned back toward me and tapped the side of the suitcase twice. Then he disappeared onto the platform. I reported it the next morning. Not to police at first, to transit workers. I told them I thought I had seen human remains inside a suitcase. The worker behind the booth looked exhausted before I even finished explaining. He asked if I had pictures. I didn't. He asked if I was sure. I said no. Eventually, 2 officers spoke to me. They asked for details, but the problem with New York is that describing an older man in a gray coat with a black suitcase narrows it down to almost nobody. They took the report anyway. Nothing happened. No alerts. No follow-up. No calls. Part of me wondered if exhaustion had distorted what I saw, until 3 nights later. That night, the subway stalled between stations for almost 15 minutes. The lights dimmed. The car temperature climbed immediately. Nobody talked. Everyone just stared at their phones in silence while the train sat unmoving in the tunnel. Then I heard the clicking. Click, click, pause. Click, click, coming from the next car. My chest tightened instantly. The connecting door slowly opened. The man stepped through, pulling the suitcase behind him. I looked around expecting someone else to react. Nobody did. A woman beside me kept scrolling through social media. A guy farther down the car was asleep against the window. The man stopped directly in the center aisle. Then the train lights shut off completely. Pitch black. A few people groaned in annoyance. Someone laughed nervously. Then came the smell. Strong this time. Rotting sweetness mixed with chemicals. When emergency lights flickered on dim red, the man was closer. Much closer. The suitcase stood beside my seat now. I could hear something moving inside it. Slow scraping. Like fingernails dragging against hard plastic. The man leaned down slightly toward me and whispered, "She's still alive sometimes." I stumbled backward, so hard I hit the subway doors. Nobody reacted. That was the part that terrified me most. Either nobody heard him, or nobody wanted to. Then the train jolted back into motion. The normal lights returned. The man walked calmly into the next car and disappeared. At the following station, I got off and immediately found police. This time I was shaking hard enough they took me seriously. I gave a full description, told them exactly what he said, told them about the hand inside the suitcase. Several officers searched the station. Nothing. No man. No suitcase. No cameras clearly showing him. One officer quietly suggested I might need sleep. That nearly made me lose my mind. For the next week, I avoided trains entirely and spent ridiculous money on ride shares home from work. But eventually reality catches up with you. New York drains money fast. So I went back underground. I convinced myself maybe the man was mentally ill. Maybe I had misinterpreted what I saw. Maybe the hand belonged to a mannequin. Maybe the whisper had been something else entirely. Then the missing person posters started appearing. Adult women, different ages, different backgrounds, most probably unrelated, except for one detail. Every single disappearance happened near late-night subway stations. I noticed because I had become obsessed. I started checking forums online, transit crime pages, local discussion boards. That's when I found old posts going back years. People describing a man with a suitcase, always late at night, always near the last trains, always watching tunnels. One post stood out. It was from someone claiming to work overnight cleaning subway stations. They wrote that certain employees had unofficial stories about the suitcase commuter. Workers supposedly reported finding abandoned luggage with restraints inside. Others claimed cameras malfunctioned whenever he appeared. Most comments mocked the story. A few didn't. One reply simply said, "If you see him, do not let him know you noticed a suitcase." Too late for that. After that night, things changed. I started seeing him everywhere, not just stations, across the street outside work, standing motionless near food carts, at the far end of platforms, once reflected in the dark subway window behind me, even though nobody was standing there when I turned around. Then the phone calls began. No caller ID, always after 2 a.m. At first, silence, then distant subway sounds. Brakes screaming, tunnel wind, announcements muffled beyond recognition. One night, I heard suitcase wheels clicking slowly closer through the phone speaker. Click, click, pause, click, click, then breathing. Then the call disconnected. I changed my number. 2 days later, the calls resumed. That was when I started sleeping with lights on. My work performance collapsed. I was constantly exhausted. Customers complained I looked distracted. I jumped every time I heard rolling luggage near the lobby. Eventually, one of my supervisors asked if I was using drugs. I almost laughed. I probably looked like I was. Then came the worst night. I boarded the final train home around 3 a.m. after mandatory overtime. Only 4 other people were in the car. A nurse, 2 construction workers, an older woman asleep near the doors. I immediately relaxed because he wasn't there. Then the train entered the tunnel and stopped. The lights flickered red. My stomach dropped instantly. The intercom crackled with static. Then silence. Click, click from the next car. The construction workers heard it too. One looked up irritably. The connecting door opened. The suitcase man stepped through. But this time there was no suitcase. He walked calmly down the aisle alone. The workers glanced at him, then away again. He stopped directly beside me. Then he leaned close enough for me to smell bleach on his clothes and quietly said, "It's your turn to carry it." Before I could react, the lights shut off. Complete darkness. Someone cursed farther down the car. Then I felt something cold press into my hand. Plastic, a suitcase handle. The emergency lights came back on. The man was gone. The other passengers were staring at their phones. And beside me stood a large black suitcase. Alone, handle in my hand. I let go instantly and stumbled backward. Nobody reacted. Nobody even looked at it. The train resumed movement. I moved into the next car at the next stop and got off 2 stations early. I called police immediately. This time they found the suitcase. Bomb squad came first, then detectives, then ambulances. The station shut down for hours. The news never released full details, but they found a restrained adult woman inside, alive, barely. The police interviewed me for almost 8 hours afterward. I told them everything. The man, the trains, the calls, the sightings. They showed me transit camera footage from the station. I was visible. The suitcase was visible. But according to every camera angle, I had boarded the train alone. No man in a gray coat ever appeared. No footage showed anyone placing the suitcase beside me. One detective eventually asked whether I had been under unusual stress lately. That question nearly broke me. But then something happened that changed their tone completely. One officer entered the room holding a photograph. They placed it in front of me. It showed a transit camera still from another station 3 nights earlier. And there he was, standing near the platform edge. Gray coat, black gloves, watching the tunnel. Beside him stood the suitcase. The detective admitted they'd received similar reports before. Very few witnesses. Most inconsistent. Several involving missing persons. But they had never identified him. No matching ID. No fingerprints. Nothing useful from cameras. Like he existed in fragments. Always partially obscured. Always leaving before officers arrived. The rescued woman survived. She apparently told investigators very little. Trauma, according to reports. The city quietly moved on. Stations reopened. People kept commuting. And officially, nobody ever found the man with the suitcase. I quit my job shortly afterward. I stopped taking trains entirely. For months, I barely left my apartment at night. Eventually, life became normal again, or close enough, until last winter. I was walking home around midnight after dinner with friends. Snow had started falling heavily, coating the sidewalks in gray slush. I passed a subway entrance and glanced down automatically toward the platform below. And there he was, standing alone under the fluorescent lights. Older now, or maybe just thinner, still wearing the gray coat, still beside a black suitcase. Even from street level, I could see him looking directly at me. Then slowly, the suitcase handle lifted upward by itself, like someone inside was trying to stand it upright. I walked away immediately. I didn't run. I didn't look back. Because after everything that happened, I finally understood something about New York. Some people disappear in this city. Others become part of it. And somewhere beneath millions of strangers rushing home every night, the suitcase man is probably still waiting for the last train. I used to think a doorman building meant safety. That was the whole reason I stretched my budget to move into one. The apartment was tiny, overpriced, and barely had enough room for a couch. But the building had cameras, a front desk, key fob access, and a package room that required staff to unlock it. After years of living in cheaper walk-ups, that felt like luxury. For the first month, I loved it. Then the packages started arriving. The first one came on a rainy Tuesday night. It was a small brown box with my apartment number on it, but no name, no return address, no company label, just a printed sticker with the building address and my unit. The front desk attendant said it had been left with the afternoon delivery pile. I told him I wasn't expecting anything. He shrugged and said, "Happens all the time." I took it upstairs. Inside was a single-use key. No note, just a brass key wrapped in tissue paper. I thought it was weird, but New York makes you accept weird things quickly. I figured maybe it belonged to an old tenant, or someone had mixed up apartments. I put it in a drawer and forgot about it. 2 days later, another package arrived. Same box, same label style, no sender. Inside was a photograph. It showed the inside of my building lobby, taken from behind the front desk. In the picture, I was walking past the mailboxes, holding a grocery bag, completely unaware I was being photographed. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "You look tired when you come home." I reported it immediately. The front desk attendant looked uncomfortable, but not shocked. He checked the package log and said there was no record of who dropped it off. No delivery company. No staff initials. That was impossible because every package was supposed to be logged. He told me he would notify management. Management emailed me the next morning. They said they were reviewing the matter. That phrase means nothing. A few nights later, I came home around midnight and found the front desk empty. That almost never happened. The lobby lights were dimmed. Rain streaked the glass doors. The city outside looked blurry and distant. On the counter was another brown box. My apartment number was written on it by hand this time. I didn't touch it. I called out for the attendant. No answer. The lobby was silent, except for the soft hum of the elevators. Then the service elevator opened by itself. Nobody was inside. I backed toward the front doors, but before I reached them, the phone at the desk rang. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. I don't know why I answered. Maybe because I was scared. Maybe because I wanted control of something. I picked up the receiver. A man whispered, "Take your package." Then the line went dead. I left the box there and went upstairs. The next morning, it was gone. Management claimed there was no footage of the call. They said the lobby camera had briefly failed overnight, but the package room camera had caught something. They wouldn't show me the footage. They only said an unauthorized individual may have accessed the building. That was when I started noticing the staff acting differently around me. The front desk attendants became too polite. The superintendent avoided eye contact. One maintenance worker, an older guy who always seemed half asleep, told me quietly near the trash room, "Don't accept anything without a delivery label." I asked him what he meant. He just shook his head and walked away. The next package was waiting outside my apartment door. Not in the lobby, not in the package room. Right outside my door on the 22nd floor. That meant someone had gotten past the front desk, past the locked elevator, past the cameras, and directly to my unit. The box was heavier than the others. I should have called the police before opening it. Instead, I stood in the hallway, staring at it, feeling that terrible pull curiosity as when fear is attached to it. Inside was a pair of shoes. My shoes. A pair I had thrown out 2 weeks earlier because the soles were splitting. They were clean now, carefully washed, the laces tied together. Under them was a note. "You leave things behind too easily." I called the police. 2 officers came, looked at the box, took my statement, and asked if I had an ex-boyfriend, a co-worker issue, a neighbor dispute, anything like that. I said no. They asked if anything had been stolen. I said no. They asked if I had security footage. I told them the building did. The building manager told them there was no useful footage from my floor because the hallway camera had been temporarily obstructed. By what? No one could say. After the officers left, the manager assured me they were taking it seriously. Then she suggested I may want to have packages held at a pickup location for peace of mind, as if the problem was shipping, not a person who knew where I lived. That night, I pushed my couch against the door. I barely slept. Around 3:10 in the morning, I heard paper sliding under the door. I turned on the light. A receipt lay on the floor. It was from a convenience store near my building. The timestamp was from earlier that night. Printed across the bottom, where a customer survey message should have been, someone had written in black ink, "The couch won't help." I screamed then, not because of the note, because the couch moved, just slightly. Something pushed the door from the hallway. Once, gently, testing. The deadbolt held. The couch shifted another inch. Then a voice spoke from the other side. "Calm. Mayo." Almost bored. "I know you're awake." I called 911 while sitting on the floor with my back against the couch. By the time police arrived, the hallway was empty. No one on the cameras. No one in the stairwell. Nothing. The only thing they found was a maintenance key left on the carpet outside my door. It was the same shape as the key from the first package. When management saw it, everything changed. Suddenly they were nervous. They admitted that a set of building master keys had gone missing months before I moved in. They claimed the locks were changed. They claimed the issue had been handled. But my key from the package still opened something. The police tested it. It opened the service door to the package room. That room became the center of everything. The package room was in the basement behind the lobby, next to the laundry area and storage cages. Residents couldn't enter alone. Staff had to scan a badge and unlock it. I had been in there plenty of times. It was narrow, windowless, lined with metal shelves and cardboard boxes. Normal during the day. At night, I imagined it differently. Rows of packages, sitting in the dark. My name printed on boxes I never ordered. Someone waiting behind the shelves, listening to footsteps overhead. The police asked management for all package room footage from the last month. That was when they found the blind spot. One corner near the back shelves was not visible on camera. A person could stand there and not be seen. Behind those shelves was a small locked utility panel. Behind the panel was an old service corridor. It ran behind the basement walls. The superintendent claimed it was unused. But inside, police found a folding chair, a battery lantern, food wrappers, a stack of blank shipping labels, and dozens of printed photos. Most were of the lobby. Some were of residents. 5 were of me. One showed me checking my mailbox. One showed me leaving for work. One showed me in the elevator, staring at my phone. The last one was taken from inside my apartment. It showed my living room, my couch, my window, my television paused on a show I had been watching the night before. I felt something inside me go cold. The officer asked if I had recently let anyone inside. I said no. Then he showed me the final item they found in the corridor. A copy of my apartment key, not a master key, my personal unit key. Someone had copied it. I moved out that same day. Not officially. I just packed a bag and stayed with a coworker. Management offered to change my locks and assign extra security. I told them they should have done that before someone photographed my living room. For 3 days, I didn't return. During that time, police searched the service corridors, questioned staff, and reviewed footage. They found evidence that someone had been living inside parts of the building for weeks, maybe longer, not in one place. Moving through utility spaces, storage rooms, vacant units, maintenance areas. The building had been renovated so many times that no one knew every hidden access point. The scariest part was that the person seemed to understand the building better than the people paid to maintain it. On the 4th day, a detective called me. They had identified a former temporary maintenance worker, adult male, no permanent address, had worked in the building briefly months earlier. He had access to keys, staff areas, camera layouts, and package procedures. Then he disappeared after being let go. They believed he had never fully left. For a moment, that almost made me feel better. At least he was real. At least I wasn't crazy. Then the detective asked me a question that made my throat close. "Did you receive anything today?" I said no. He told me not to go back to the building alone. I asked why. He said a package had been found in the lobby with my apartment number on it. Inside was a phone. It was recording. The video showed my co-worker's apartment hallway, where I was staying. I left immediately. The next few weeks became a blur of police interviews, hotel rooms, and constant panic. They never found him. Not in the building. Not in the surrounding blocks. Not on transit cameras. But he kept leaving packages. One at the front desk of my office. One outside a coffee shop I visited once. One in the back seat of a rideshare after I got out. That one contained only a printed map of Manhattan with red circles around places I had been. At the bottom, written neatly, "You keep choosing rooms with exits." After that, I stopped going outside unless absolutely necessary. I changed jobs, changed phones, changed apartments, cut contact with almost everyone for a while. Eventually, the packages stopped. No final message, no arrest, no explanation, just silence. And silence, when you've been hunted, does not feel like peace. It feels like someone holding their breath. Almost a year later, I moved into a different building in a different borough. No doorman this time. No package room. No luxury lobby. Just a normal apartment with a solid door and a neighbor who smoked too much in the hallway. For a while, I started to feel human again. Then one evening, I came home from work and found a delivery notice stuck to my door. It said I had a package waiting downstairs. No company name. No tracking number. Just my apartment number. I stood in the hallway for a long time staring at it. Then my phone buzzed. A new text from an unknown number. It said, "I can leave it upstairs if you want." I didn't go downstairs. I didn't sleep there again. I left New York 3 weeks later. People think horror in New York is loud. They imagine screaming subway platforms, dark alleys, strangers following you down empty streets. But the worst horror I ever experienced was quiet. A box on a counter, a key and tissue paper, a camera that stopped working at exactly the wrong time, a person who learned every locked door better than I did. And to this day, I do not order anything to my home, because every time I see a brown cardboard box outside someone's apartment, I wonder if it's really theirs, or if someone is using it to say, "I found you again." I should have known something was wrong when the listing said the apartment was available immediately. In New York, that usually means one of three things. It's a scam, it's disgusting, or something happened there. At the time, I didn't care. I had 2 weeks to move. My lease renewal had jumped hundreds of dollars. And every apartment I could afford either had no windows, no real kitchen, or a broker fee that made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. So when I found a one-bedroom listed below market in a decent neighborhood, close to the train, I messaged right away. The reply came back in less than a minute. "Viewing tonight only. Bring ID. Serious renters only." That should have bothered me. It didn't. I asked what time. The person replied, 11:30 p.m. I stared at the message for a while. An apartment viewing before midnight was strange, but not impossible. I had heard of brokers showing places late when tenants worked odd schedules. New York runs all night. People sign leases at weird times. People move at weird times. Everything is inconvenient and expensive. So eventually you stop questioning inconvenience. I asked if there was an earlier time. They replied, "No, current tenant sleeps during day. This is the only opening." Then they sent the address. The building was in an older part of Manhattan, on a side street between brighter avenues. When I arrived, the block was quiet in that specific New York way where you can still hear sirens and traffic nearby. But the street itself feels abandoned. The building looked normal. Old brick, black front door, 4 or 5 floors, a row of buzzers, some trash bags stacked near the curb. There was no broker waiting outside. I checked my phone. 11:27 p.m. Then I got a text. "Doors open. Come to 4C." The front door buzzed before I touched anything. I stepped inside. The lobby smelled like old radiator heat, floor cleaner, and wet cardboard. The tile was cracked. A security mirror hung in the corner, angled toward the mailboxes. No camera that I could see. There was no elevator. Of course there wasn't. I climbed to the 4th floor, trying not to breathe too loudly. The stairwell lights flickered slightly, and every landing looked the same. Beige walls, dark railings, apartment doors with old brass numbers. When I reached the 4th floor, the hallway was silent, for C was at the far end. The door was open about 6 inches. I knocked lightly. "Hello?" No answer. I pushed the door open. The apartment was dark, except for a lamp in the living room. At first glance, it looked exactly like the listing photos. Small but clean, narrow kitchen, exposed brick wall, window facing the street, hardwood floors, a half-empty bookshelf, a couch with a blanket folded over the arm. It looked lived in, but staged. That was the first thing that felt wrong. A real lived-in apartment has clutter that makes sense. Dishes drying, shoes by the door, a phone charger on the floor, mail on a table. This place had objects, but they felt chosen, like someone had arranged evidence of a person. There was a mug on the coffee table with cold tea inside, a jacket hanging on a chair, a pair of women's boots near the door, but no purse. No keys, no phone, no sound. I called out again. Still nothing. Then my phone buzzed. "Go ahead and look around." Tenant stepped out. I typed back, "Are you the broker?" The reply came, "Yes." I asked, "Are you coming up?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then the reply came, "Already here." I froze. I turned slowly toward the hallway behind me. No one was there. The apartment door remained open. I told myself the broker meant they were in the building. Still, I stepped back toward the door. That was when it closed. Not slammed, not loudly. It clicked shut with a soft, final sound of a lock settling into place. I grabbed the handle immediately. It didn't move. I turned the deadbolt. It spun loosely, not unlocking anything. My heart started beating, so hard I could feel it in my throat. I called the number from the listing. A phone rang inside the apartment. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound came from the bedroom. I should have run to the window and screamed. Instead, I stood there listening like an idiot, because fear does that. It makes you wait for things you already understand. The ringing stopped. A man's voice came from somewhere behind the bedroom door. "Don't hang up." I did hang up. Then I called 911. No service. That was impossible. I had service in the stairwell 2 minutes earlier. I moved toward the front window, raising my phone, searching for bars. Nothing. The bedroom door opened. A little, just enough to show darkness beyond it. I didn't wait. I grabbed the lamp from the side table and swung it at the living room window. The glass cracked but didn't break fully. Safety glass, maybe, or thick old glass. I hit it again. A voice behind me said, "You'll hurt yourself." I spun around. A man stood in the bedroom doorway. Adult, average height, dark sweater, gloves, a plain black face mask covering his nose and mouth. He wasn't holding a weapon. That made it worse somehow. He looked calm, like this was a procedure. I screamed for help and swung the lamp toward him. He stepped back into the bedroom and shut the door. Then the apartment lights went out. Complete darkness. I dropped the lamp and ran my hands along the wall, searching for front door. I found it, pulled, kicked, twisted the loose deadbolt again. Nothing. From behind me, somewhere in the dark, the man said, "You were the first one to come alone." His voice was close. Too close. I threw myself sideways and hit the kitchen counter. My hand found a drawer. I yanked it open and grabbed the first thing inside. A butter knife. Not helpful, but it was something. The lights came back on. The man was gone. The bedroom door was shut again. On the kitchen counter, where there had been nothing before, was a rental application. My name was already printed at the top. My full name, my phone number, my current address, my workplace, information I had not sent. I backed away from it. That was when I noticed the walls. The exposed brick section in the living room had small dark spots between the bricks. I had thought they were old nail holes. They weren't. Tiny cameras, at least 6 of them. One above the kitchen cabinets, one near the smoke detector, one inside the bookshelf. The whole apartment was watching me. My phone buzzed again. A message from the listing number. "Sit on the couch." I didn't. Another message came. "You are making this harder than the others." I ran to the window and started shouting. The street below was empty. Across the way, windows glowed in other buildings, but no one appeared. I hit the glass again with the lamp base until my hands hurt. The masked man spoke through a hidden speaker this time. His voice came from everywhere. "People don't look up." He was right. I screamed until my throat burned. Nobody came. Then I heard footsteps outside the apartment door. For 1 second, hope flooded through me. I shouted, "Help! I'm locked in." The footsteps stopped. A woman's voice called softly from the hallway. "Are you viewing the apartment too?" I rushed to the door. "Yes." "Call the police." "Don't come in." Silence. Then the woman said, "They told me 11:45. My stomach dropped. I screamed, "Leave! Go downstairs right now." The lock clicked. The door opened 1 inch. I could see one eye through the gap, not the woman's. A man's eye, wide open, watching me. Then the door shut again. A message appeared on my phone. "Good. You can follow instructions." The woman in the hallway screamed. It was brief, cut off fast. Then there was dragging, something heavy being pulled across the floor outside the door. I backed away, shaking so badly I could barely stand. A minute later, the door opened fully. No one was in the hallway, but the apartment key had been left on the floor. I didn't trust it. I still ran. I grabbed the key, unlocked the door, and bolted into the hallway. The corridor was empty. No woman, no blood, no sign of struggle. Just the stairwell door at the end slowly closing. I ran down the stairs so fast, I nearly fell twice. On the second floor landing, I heard footsteps above me, not running, walking, calmly, following. I burst into the lobby and slammed into the front door. Locked. There was a thumb-turned deadbolt, but it had been removed. Just a round metal hole where it should have been. The buzzer panel began ringing. Every apartment button lit up at once. A distorted voice came through the intercom speaker. Open house. Then laughter. Not loud, not theatrical. Just quiet laughter, multiplied to the cheap speaker until it sounded like several people. I grabbed a trash can from the lobby and threw it through the glass front door. It took 3 tries, but the glass finally broke. An alarm started screaming. I climbed through the broken section, cutting my arm on the way out, and ran into the street. A cab honked as I stumbled into the road. I waved both arms and screamed for help. The driver sped away. Of course he did. The alarm was still blaring behind me when I saw the masked man step out of the building. He didn't chase me. He stood in the doorway holding a phone. Then my phone buzzed. A new message. You are not approved. I ran until I found an all-night deli. The man behind the counter took one look at me and called the police. When officers arrived, I told them everything. The listing, the locked apartment, the cameras, the woman in the hallway, the masked man. The police went to the building. By then, the front door was open. No alarm, no broken glass, no apartment listing, no cameras in 4C, no furniture. The unit was empty, completely empty. No couch, no bookshelf, no lamp, no boots, no mug, just dust on the floor and paint peeling near the window. The officers looked at me differently after that, like I was either lying or too traumatized to understand what had happened. Then one of them found the rental application. It was folded under the radiator. My name at the top, my information underneath. At the bottom, written in black marker, denied, lives alone but screams too much. That was the only reason they believed me. A detective later told me the unit had been vacant for almost 2 years. The owner lived out of state. The apartment had been tied up in legal issues. No one should have had access, but someone did. Someone had staged the entire apartment for a fake viewing. Furniture in, furniture out, cameras installed, locks altered, listing posted and deleted, all in one night. And they had done it before. The detective didn't say that directly. I figured it out from what he asked. Had I seen any other applicants? Had I noticed cleaning supplies? Had I smelled bleach? Did the woman in the hallway give her name? Had I seen any storage bins? Did the man mention the others? I never found out what happened to the woman. Maybe there was no woman. Maybe it was a recording. Maybe it was someone working with them. Or maybe she was real. And the city swallowed her the way it swallows people all the time. The listing disappeared, but similar ones kept appearing. Different neighborhoods, different photos, same style, below market, available immediately, late night viewing only, bring ID, serious renters only. I reported everyone I found. Most were gone within hours. A few stayed up long enough to gather messages from desperate people like me. That was the part that haunted me most. They weren't grabbing random victims off the street. They were filtering for people under pressure, people who needed housing fast, people willing to ignore red flags because rent was due and time was running out, people who might come alone. A month later, I received one final text from an unknown number. It contained a photo. It showed me standing outside a different apartment building in daylight, speaking to a legitimate broker. I was holding a folder of documents. The message underneath said, "Better choice. More witnesses." I changed my number, deleted every rental account, stopped going to viewings alone. Eventually, I found a place. It was more expensive than I wanted, farther from work than I wanted, and not nearly as nice as a fake apartment had been. But the broker met me at noon. The doors opened from the inside, and I brought 2 people with me. Even now, years later, I still look at apartment listings sometimes just out of habit. And every once in a while, I see one. A perfect apartment. Too cheap. Available now. Photos that look normal until you notice something small. A lamp that appears in 3 rooms. A mirror reflecting no photographer. A front door with scratches around the lock. And I always wonder how many people message before it disappears. How many get the address? How many show up alone? Because in New York, desperation is currency, and someone out there learned how to collect it. I used to do laundry after midnight because it was the only time the machines were empty. That was the lie I told myself. Anyway, the real reason was that I hated waiting. I hated standing under fluorescent lights beside strangers, guarding my clothes like someone might steal my socks. I hated the way laundromats felt during the day, humid and crowded. Everyone pretending not to notice everyone else's underwear spinning behind glass. So I went late, usually around 1 a.m. The laundromat was 3 blocks from my apartment, on the corner of a narrow side street and a louder avenue. It was open 24 hours, but after midnight, there was almost never an attendant, just rows of washers, dryers, folding tables, vending machines, and a small television bolted high in the corner that played muted local news. The place had cameras. That mattered to me. It made me feel like even if nobody was there, somebody could check what happened later. I eventually learned that cameras only matter when the person watching them wants to help. The first strange thing happened in winter. It was one of those freezing New York nights where the sidewalks shine with dirty ice and every gust of wind feels personal. I carried 2 bags of laundry over my shoulders and pushed to the laundromat door at 1:12 a.m. Empty. Perfect. I loaded 2 washers in the back row, paid with a card machine, and sat near the front window with my phone. About 10 minutes into the cycle, one of the dryers started turning. No one had been using it when I came in. I looked up. The dryer was on the far wall, a third from the end. It spun slowly, then faster, then settled into that dull, heavy rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. I figured someone had left clothes in there, and the machine had restarted somehow. Old machines did weird things. Then I noticed there were no clothes inside. The dryer was empty, just spinning. I watched it for another minute, feeling stupid for being unsettled by an appliance. Then it stopped. The door popped open. Inside was a folded white towel. It had not been there before. I stood up slowly. The laundromat was still empty. The bathroom door was open. The office door was locked. No one was behind the folding tables. I walked over and stared into the dryer. The towel was folded perfectly in half. On top it was a dryer sheet. And on the dryer sheet, written in pen, were 3 words. You forgot this. I hadn't forgotten anything. I left my laundry wet and walked home as fast as I could. The next morning, I came back during daylight and told the attendant what happened. She barely listened. She said people left weird things behind all the time. I asked if she could check the cameras. She said only the owner could. I asked when the owner came in. She said, whenever he wants. That should have been the end of it, but I needed my clothes. So I finished the laundry in the middle of the day and avoided the place for almost 2 weeks. Then my hamper filled up, and in New York, avoidance has a time limit. I tried going at a normal hour, but the laundromat was packed. Every machine was full. People had carts blocking the aisles. Someone was arguing over a dryer. A man was folding shirts slowly across 3 tables like he owned the building. So I went back after midnight. This time, I told myself I was being ridiculous. I loaded 1 washer only near the front where I could see the door and the street. I kept my coat on. I didn't sit. I stood beside the machine for the entire cycle. Nothing happened. No empty dryers. No towels. No notes. I actually laughed at myself. Then the washer finished. I opened it. Inside, on top of my wet clothes, was a pair of black gloves. They were adult-sized. Leather. Soaking wet. I stared at them, unable to move. They were tangled into my clothes like they had been washed with them from the beginning. But I knew they hadn't been. I had loaded that machine myself. I had checked the drum. I had stood beside it the entire time. I picked them up with 2 fingers and dropped them into a trash can. Then I threw my wet clothes into a dryer and watched every second through the glass. When the dryer stopped, I opened the door. My clothes were dry. The gloves were back, folded on top, perfectly dry. One finger was pointing toward the bathroom. I left everything. All of it. My shirts, my pants, my towels. I walked out with nothing. The next day, I called a laundromat and asked if anyone had found my clothes. A man answered. I had never heard his voice before. He said, "You left before folding." I hung up. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A voicemail appeared. For a while, I just stared at it. Then I played it. At first, there was only the hum of machines. Then the man's voice whispered, "You should finish what you start." I blocked the number. That night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to a sound from my hallway. Not inside my apartment. Outside my door. Soft fabric sliding across the floor. I looked through the peephole. My laundry bags were sitting in the hallway. Both of them. The ones I had left at the laundromat. My first thought was that an employee had found my address from something in my clothes. A receipt. A delivery label. Anything. Then I realized the bags were not just dropped off. They were arranged. One on each side of my door. Like someone had placed them there carefully. Between them was a folded towel. White. Clean. On it was a note. Washed. Dried. Delivered. I called the police. They came, looked at the bags, and asked if anything had been stolen. I said no. They asked if anyone had threatened me. I played the voicemail. The officer admitted it was creepy. That word felt insulting. Creepy is a doll in a thrift store. Creepy is an old basement. This was a person learning where I lived. They told me to avoid the laundromat and file a report if it continued. I wanted to ask what continued meant. Did he need to be standing in my bedroom? Did he need to drag me somewhere? How much proof did fear require? For the next month, I used a laundry pickup service, even though I couldn't afford it. Nothing happened. Then one evening, my laundry delivery came back with an extra item, a gray sweatshirt. Not mine, folded between my towels. Across the chest, in black marker, someone had written, "You look better in dark colors." The laundry service insisted it wasn't from them. They checked their facility. They checked their drivers. They said my bag had been sealed. They offered a refund. I threw the sweatshirt away in a public trash in 6 blocks from my apartment. The next morning, it was hanging on my bathroom door, damp, like someone had rinsed it. I moved that week. Not far, just to a different apartment in the same general area. Because breaking a lease in New York is expensive, and moving farther would have meant changing jobs. I told almost nobody my new address. For a while, the silence returned. Then one night, in my new building, I went downstairs to use the basement laundry room. I had promised myself I wouldn't use laundromats anymore. A basement laundry room felt safer. Only residents could enter. You needed a key fob for the building, a key for the basement, and another key for the laundry room. The room was small. 3 washers, 3 dryers, concrete floor, pipes overhead, no windows, a camera in the corner with a tiny red light. I started a load and sat on a plastic chair by the door. The machines were loud enough to cover small sounds. That bothered me. Every few minutes, I paused my phone and listened. Nothing. When the washer finished, I stood up. The dryer in the corner was already running. I had not started it. There were no clothes inside, just spinning. Thump, thump, thump. My body went cold. I backed toward the door. The dryer stopped. The door popped open. Inside was the gray sweatshirt, folded, dry, waiting. The laundry room lights went out. I reached for the door handle in the dark. Locked. From the outside. I pulled hard. Nothing. The machines kept humming. Then a voice spoke from the vent above the dryers. "You keep moving before the cycle ends." I screamed. I kicked the door. I banged on it with both fists until my hands hurt. No one came. The voice continued through the vent, calm and close. I don't like chasing. I like routine. I called 911. This time my phone had service. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way. I kept yelling my address, the basement, the laundry room, the voice from the vent side. Then the dryer started again. Thump, thump, thump. But now the sound was heavier. Like something was inside with the sweatshirt. The door to the dryer rattled. Once, twice. Then the laundry room door unlocked. I didn't wait for police. I ran upstairs barefoot, leaving my shoes, my laundry, everything, in the lobby. I nearly collided with an older resident coming in from outside. I begged him to keep the front door open and wait with me. He did. Maybe he saw my face. Maybe he heard the way I couldn't breathe. When police arrived, we all went back down together. The laundry room was empty. The dryer was open. No sweatshirt. No clothes. No sign anyone had been there. But the camera in the corner had been covered with a wet dryer sheet. The building manager reviewed the entry logs. According to the system, no one else had entered the basement after me. No resident. No staff. No forced door. Nothing. But one thing was wrong. The key fob system showed my old apartment building's laundry card number had been used at the basement door. That wasn't supposed to be possible. A laundry card from a public laundromat should not open a private building door unless someone had copied access credentials or someone working with building systems had created a fake one. The police finally took the case more seriously. They questioned the laundromat owner. He denied everything. They questioned employees. The woman attendant said she remembered me, but she hadn't seen anything unusual. Then the police asked for camera footage from the nights I had reported incidents. The owner said the footage had been overwritten. All of it. Then he claimed the cameras had been down. Then he stopped answering questions without a lawyer. But they couldn't prove he had done anything. And I had never seen the man's face, only heard his voice. For several weeks, officers watched the laundromat. Nothing happened. No strange deliveries. No suspicious employees. No one carrying my clothes. Eventually, the attention faded. The city has too many emergencies to care about one person being terrorized by laundry. I started taking my clothes to a wash and fold place in a completely different neighborhood. I used a fake first name. Paid cash. Never gave my address. That worked for a while, until I picked up a bag and found every item inside turned inside out. Every shirt, every sock, every towel. At the bottom of the bag was a small plastic container. Inside was lint, gray and soft and packed tightly. There was a note taped to the lid. I keep what you leave behind. I don't know why that disturbed me more than anything else. Maybe because it was so small, so intimate. Everyone leaves lint. Hair, skin, threads, tiny pieces of themselves. Things you never think about. The idea that someone had collected mine made me feel like I had been slowly disassembled without noticing. I threw the container into the river. For 3 nights after that, I slept in my clothes with the lights on. On the 4th night, my apartment buzzer rang at 2:08 a.m. I didn't answer. It rang again, then my phone buzzed. Unknown number, a text message, laundry delivery. I called police immediately. While I was on the phone, my building door buzzed open downstairs. I heard it through the floor, then footsteps in the stairwell. Slow, unhurried, coming up. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. I dragged my kitchen table against the door and stood behind it holding a hammer. The footsteps stopped outside. Something soft was placed on the floor. Then came 3 light taps. Not hard, almost polite. The voice said, "Clean clothes." I didn't answer. After a while, the footsteps went back down. Police arrived 12 minutes later. Outside my door was a clear plastic laundry bag. Inside were clothes. Not mine. Women's clothes. Men's clothes. Different sizes. Different styles. All neatly folded. Every item had a paper tag pinned to it. Each tag had an apartment number. Not addresses, just apartment numbers. 5B. 2A, 12C, 7F, dozens of them. The police believed they were trophies, not from people he had hurt necessarily, maybe from buildings he had accessed, people he had watched, lives he had quietly entered through laundry rooms, service doors, pickup bags, and unattended machines. That was when I realized I had never been special. I was just one routine he liked, One person who came late. One person alone. One person predictable. The laundromat closed 2 months later. No announcement. One day it was open. The next, the windows were covered with brown paper. The owner disappeared. The police never told me whether he was arrested for anything. I checked local news every day for weeks. Nothing. Maybe they never caught him. Maybe he moved. Maybe he found another business. Another basement. Another building where people trusted locked doors and camera lights. I left New York eventually. Not right away. It took time to save money, break my lease, and convince myself that leaving wasn't losing. Before I moved, I made one final trip past a laundromat. The brown paper had peeled back from one corner of the front window. Inside, the machines were still there, dark, silent, rows of circular glass doors reflecting the street behind me. For a second, I thought I saw someone standing in the back, near the dryers. Not clearly, just a shape, a dull height, still, watching through the reflection. Then my phone buzzed. I looked down. Unknown number. One message. Delicate cycle next time. I didn't look back. I changed my number again before I left the city. Even now, I don't use laundromats. I don't use shared laundry rooms. I don't send clothes out. I wash everything myself, inside my own home, with the door locked. And every time the dryer thumps too loudly, I stop what I'm doing and listen. Because sometimes it's just a towel. Sometimes it's a shoe. Sometimes it's nothing. But once you've heard an empty dryer start turning by itself after midnight, you never fully believe in empty machines again. The building looked safest from the outside. That was the strange part. 40-something floors of glass and steel, security guards in the lobby, cameras in every corner, turnstiles that only open with an ID badge, and elevators that wouldn't even let you choose a floor unless you were authorized. From the street, it looked untouchable, like nothing bad could happen inside a place that bright. I worked there for almost 6 months before I learned that tall buildings don't make you safer. They just make it harder for anyone to hear you. I wasn't an executive or anything close to it. I worked overnight cleaning offices. It was steady work, and the hours fit my life at the time. I'd arrive around 10 p.m., sign in at the service desk, take the freight elevator up, and clean my assigned floors while the city below slowly emptied out. Most nights were boring. Vacuum conference rooms, empty trash cans, wipe tables, restock bathrooms. Avoid touching anything on desks that looked expensive. By 2 a.m., the building felt less like a workplace and more like a museum of people who had vanished mid-thought. Half-drunk coffees on desks, coats on chairs, family photos beside dark monitors, white boards full of plans no one cared about until morning. My assigned area was the 43rd floor. It belonged to a financial office. Frosted glass walls, silent meeting rooms, expensive chairs, a reception desk no one used overnight. The first thing I noticed was the locked office. There was one interior office near the back corner that I was told never to enter. The cleaning supervisor said it belonged to someone important and had a separate cleaning arrangement. That was fine with me. One less room. But every night when I passed it, the motion sensor light inside was on. I could see the glow under the door. At first, I assumed someone was working late, but I never saw anyone enter or leave. No footsteps. No voices, no elevator chime, just that thin strip of light beneath the door. One night, curiosity got to me. I leaned close to the frosted glass beside the office door and listened. Nothing. Then I heard typing, slow typing, one key at a time. Click, pause, click, pause, click. I knocked lightly. The typing stopped. I said, "Cleaning." No answer. A few seconds later, the light under the door went out. I backed away and finished the floor as fast as I could. The next morning, I mentioned it to my supervisor. She frowned and told me no one should be in that office overnight. I asked if she wanted to report it. She said, "Just don't go near it." That was how people handle problems in that building. Don't go near it. Don't ask. Don't make it your issue. So I didn't. For a few nights, nothing happened. Then I found the first note. It was in the trash can outside the locked office. A single sheet of white printer paper, folded once. I should have thrown it away without looking. But cleaners see things. Receipts, letters, printed emails, drafts of resignations, divorce papers, medical bills. People throw away pieces of themselves every night and assume the trash makes them disappear. I unfolded it. There were only 4 words typed in the center of the page. You missed a spot. I looked around the hallway. Empty. The locked office door was dark. I crumpled the paper and put it back in the trash. The next night, the same note was taped to my cleaning cart. You missed a spot. This time, underneath the words, someone had drawn an arrow pointing down the hallway toward the locked office. I took the note to the service desk in the lobby. The guard barely looked up from his phone. He told me office tenants were always playing weird jokes. I asked if anyone had badged onto 43 after midnight. He checked the system. No one. Then he said sometimes executives use private access that didn't show on the standard log. That sounded fake, but I didn't know enough to argue. By the next week, the notes became routine. Always typed, always the same sentence. Found in different places. Inside a bathroom stall, under a keyboard, in the supply closet, folded into the vacuum cord. You miss a spot. I stopped mentioning them because everyone made me feel stupid when I did. Then one night, I decided to actually look for the spot. Not because I wanted to please whoever was leaving the notes, because I wanted it to stop. I checked the hallway outside the locked office. The carpet was spotless. The glass walls were spotless. The metal handle was polished. The trash can was empty. Then I noticed a dark mark near the baseboard. Small, almost hidden in the corner where the locked office wall met the hallway. At first, I thought it was dried coffee. I sprayed it and wiped. It smeared reddish-brown. My hand went cold. I wiped harder. The stain came up slowly, but underneath it were tiny scratches in the wall. Not random. Letters. Someone had carved a message low into the baseboard. I had to kneel to read it. He waits until the vacuum starts. I stood so quickly, I nearly fell backward. The office light turned on. The strip beneath the door glowed white. Then the typing started. Click. Pause. Click. Pause. Click. I left the cart where it was and took the stairs down 3 floors before I could breathe. The next day, I told my supervisor I wouldn't clean 43 anymore. She said assignments weren't optional. I told her about the carved message. She said she'd speak to building security. That night, when I arrived, the baseboard had been replaced. Fresh paint, no scratches, no stain, no proof. And on my cleaning cart was a note. Better. After that, I started recording with my phone while I worked. I'd prop it on the cart, camera facing the hallway. The footage was mostly boring. Empty offices, my own footsteps, the hum of the HVAC system. But on the 4th night, I caught something. I was cleaning the kitchen area around 1:40 a.m. My cart was parked in the hallway facing the locked office. For 7 minutes, nothing moved. Then the office door opened. Not all the way, just enough for a hand to slide out. The hand was pale, adult, and wearing a silver watch. It placed a folded paper on the floor. Then the door closed. I showed the footage to the lobby guard. He watched it twice. Then his face changed. He said, "That office has been empty for 3 months." I asked what he meant. He said the executive who used it had left the company. The office was locked because legal was deciding what to do with the files inside. No one was assigned there. No one should have a key. I asked him to come upstairs with me. He refused. Not directly. He said he couldn't leave the desk. I asked him to call someone. He said he'd make a note. That phrase again. A note. Like notes had helped anyone. I refused to go back up that night. My supervisor threatened to write me up. I didn't care. The next morning, building management finally opened the locked office. They found nothing unusual. A desk, a chair, a powered-off computer, boxes of files. No person, no hidden door, no sign someone had been inside. But when they checked the desk drawer, they found a stack of typed notes. Hundreds of them, all saying the same thing. You miss a spot. The company blamed a former employee. They changed the lock. They added a temporary camera facing the door. They told me it was handled. It was not handled. The following week, I was moved to the 39th floor. Different company, different offices, different layout. For 3 nights, everything was normal. Then I found a note inside the microwave. Wrong floor. I quit immediately. I should have stayed quit, but I needed the money. 2 weeks later, the cleaning company offered me a different overnight route in the same building, lower floors only. I asked if it included 43. They said no. I came back. I still regret that. The building felt different after I returned. Maybe it was just me. Maybe once a place scares you, every corner remembers. I avoided looking at the elevator buttons. I avoided the 43rd floor entirely. But every night, around 2 a.m., one elevator would stop there. I'd hear the chime from whatever floor I was on. Soft, distant, then doors opening, then nothing. One night, while cleaning the 27th floor, my radio crackled. All cleaners carried radios. Usually it was just supervisors asking for updates or staff reporting supply issues. This time, a whisper came through. 43 needs attention. I froze. A supervisor's voice followed immediately. Who said that? Static. Then the whisper again. Missed a spot. I turned the radio off. It turned back on by itself. Come up. I left the building and didn't clock out. The cleaning company called me 6 times the next day. I ignored them. Then I received an email from an unknown address. The subject line said, "Inspection report." Attached were photos of my apartment. Not the outside. Inside. My kitchen sink. My couch. My bed. My bathroom mirror. Each photo had a red circle drawn around something small. A crumb on the counter. Dust under the radiator. A water spot on the mirror. Lint on the blanket. The email body said, "You miss spots everywhere." I moved out for a week and stayed with a relative. I filed a police report. The officer asked if I had enemies from work. I said, maybe. He asked if anything had been stolen. I said no. He asked if my door had been forced. No. He suggested I change my locks. I changed my locks. It didn't help. The next photo came from inside my new locked apartment. It showed my front door from the inside. The deadbolt was circled in red. Caption, "Better." I stopped sleeping. I started taping paper over my windows, checking closets, unplugging electronics, searching vents. I bought a small camera and aimed it at my front door. For 3 nights, it caught nothing. On the 4th, it recorded my apartment at 3:03 a.m. I was asleep in the bedroom. The living room was dark. Then the camera audio picked up a sound. Vacuuming. Faint at first, then louder. Like someone was vacuuming right outside my apartment door. The front door never opened. No one came inside. But in the morning, a perfect vacuum line ran down the center of my living room rug. One straight stripe, from the door to my bedroom. I left the city for 2 months after that. When I came back, I had a new job, a new apartment, and a new rule. No overnight shifts. No office buildings. No cleaning work. For a while, I rebuilt myself. I worked days. I slept nights. I learned to ignore cleaning carts in hallways and the sound of vacuums through apartment walls. Then, almost a year later, I got stuck late at a different job. Not cleaning. Office admin work. A normal job. Normal hours, usually. But that night, a deadline ran long, and by the time I packed my bag, it was almost midnight. The office was empty. Different building. Different borough. Different everything. I was waiting for the elevator when the lights flickered. The elevator arrived. The doors opened. Inside was a cleaning cart. No cleaner, just a cart. On top of it was a folded white paper. I already knew what it said before I opened it, but I opened it anyway. You missed a spot. Behind me, from the dark office I had just left, a vacuum started. I never saw who was doing it. That's what bothers me most. I can't give you a face. I can't give you a name. I can't even say for sure it was one person. Maybe it was a former employee. Maybe it was a building worker. Maybe it was someone who learned access systems and service corridors and camera blind spots. Or maybe the city is full of people who become invisible by wearing the right uniform and carrying the right cart. That was the real lesson. In New York, nobody questions the person cleaning up after them. You can walk into offices, apartments, hallways, elevators, even people's private routines, as long as you look like you belong there to remove the mess. And every now and then, when I'm in a public bathroom or an empty office hallway, I'll notice a spot on the floor, a smudge, a stain, a small dark mark near the baseboard. And for a second, I hear typing behind a locked door. Click, pause, click, pause, click. Then I leave. I don't check what it is. I don't clean it. I don't touch it, because some messes are left there on purpose. I rented the storage unit because my apartment was too small. That's how it starts for a lot of people in New York. You move into a place the size of a hotel room. Convince yourself you don't own that much, and then slowly realize your closet can't hold winter clothes, old documents, tools, holiday decorations, and everything you don't want to throw away yet. So you rent a little metal room somewhere else. A second closet you pay for every month. Mine was inside a self-storage building near the edge of an industrial area. It was open late, climate-controlled, and cheaper than the nicer places closer to my apartment. The building had cameras, keypad gates, freight elevators, motion lights, and a front desk during daytime hours. After 10 p.m., there was no staff. Just you, your access code, and 9 floors of locked metal doors. At first, I liked going late. It was quiet. No one blocking the elevator with moving carts. No families arguing over boxes. No people digging through their units while pretending not to watch you dig through yours. My unit was on the 9th floor. It was at the end of a long hallway where the lights came on in sections as you walked. The place always smelled like cardboard, dust, and cold air. Every footstep echoed too loudly. Every rolling cart sounded like it was following you. The first few visits were normal. Then I found the chair. It was sitting in front of my unit when I stepped off the elevator at 11:40 p.m. A metal folding chair, facing the door to 914. At first, I thought someone had left it there by accident, but the way it was placed felt intentional, centered, straight, like someone had been sitting there waiting for me. I moved it aside with my foot, unlocked my unit, grabbed the box I needed, and left. On the elevator down, I laughed at myself. A chair, that was all. New York had made me paranoid. The next week, the chair was back. Same spot, facing my unit. This time, there was something on the seat. A printed receipt from the storage facility. No name, no payment information. Just a timestamp from that night. 11:38 p.m., 2 minutes before I arrived. At the bottom, someone had written, "You are late." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I turned around and looked down the hallway. Every unit door was closed. The motion lights stretched ahead in pale white rectangles, one section fading into darkness after another. I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded small. No answer. I went straight back to the elevator and left without opening my unit. The next morning, I called a storage office. The person at the desk told me cleaning staff probably moved things around. I told her about the note. She said people dump trash all the time. I asked if she could check the cameras. She said only management could do that. I asked to speak to management. She said they would call me back. They didn't. I avoided the place for almost 2 weeks. Then I needed tax documents from one of the boxes, so I went during daylight. The 9th floor looked completely different with people around. A man was sorting through bins near the elevator. Someone had a radio playing in a unit down the hall. A couple was loading furniture onto a cart. No chair, no note, no strange feeling. I unlocked 914 and went inside. The unit was small, maybe 5 feet by 10. Boxes stacked along both walls. A plastic shelf in the back. A rolled rug standing upright. A suitcase I hadn't used in years. Everything looked normal. Then I noticed one box had been turned around. The label I had written on it used to face the door. Now it faced the wall. I told myself I must have done that. I opened it, found the folder I needed, locked up, and left. That night, around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was an email from the storage facility. Subject line, access alert. The message said my code had been used at 1:57 a.m. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. I had not gone there. I checked the email again. thinking maybe it was delayed from earlier. No, 1:57 a.m. I called the facility's emergency number. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. Then I logged into my account. The access log showed my code had entered the building at 1:57 a.m. and exited at 2:03 a.m. 6 minutes. Someone had used my code for 6 minutes. The next morning, I went in person. The manager acted concerned, but not alarmed. He said, sometimes the system glitched. I asked him to change my code. He did. I asked to see camera footage. He said he couldn't show resident security footage without a police request. I asked if he could at least check whether someone was on my floor. He said he would review it. I waited in the lobby while he went into back office. When he returned, his expression was different. He told me the cameras had briefly lost signal around that time. All cameras? He said only some. Which ones? He said he couldn't discuss security details. That was the moment I knew he was scared. Not lying exactly. Scared. I went upstairs with him to inspect my unit. He unlocked nothing. He just stood behind me while I opened it. At first, everything looked fine. Then I saw the chair, inside my unit, in the back corner, folded neatly beside the plastic shelf. I had never put it there. The manager said, "Is that yours?" I said no. He stared at it for a second too long. Then he said, "Well, remove it." I asked how someone got into my lock unit. He said maybe I had left it unlocked. I hadn't. The lock was still there, still closed, still undamaged. That was almost worse. If the lock had been broken, I could understand it. But someone had opened my unit, placed a chair inside, and locked it again. The manager offered to move me to another unit. I accepted immediately. New unit, different floor, different lock, different access code. Unit 627. I moved everything that afternoon with 2 carts and a building employee watching. Nothing seemed missing. But while moving boxes, I found something tucked inside the rolled rug, a photograph. It showed me standing in front of Unit 914, taken from behind, from inside the hallway. In the photo, I was unlocking the door. On the back, someone had written, "You keep your back turned too long." I showed it to the manager. This time, he didn't suggest a glitch. He called the police. The officers took a report, reviewed what they could, and asked the usual questions. Did I have a dispute with anyone? No. Did anyone else know I rented there? Maybe a few people. Was anything stolen? No. Had I seen a suspect? No. That was the problem. No suspect. No theft. No damage. Just fear. Fear is difficult to file. For a month, I didn't go back. I paid the bill automatically and tried not to think about it. Then another email came. Access alert. My code had been used at 3:12 a.m. The new code, the one nobody knew. I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. Entry, 3:12 a.m. Exit, 3:19 a.m. 7 minutes. I called the police first this time, then the storage facility. By the time officers met me there in the morning, the manager looked exhausted. He claimed he had already checked the footage. Same issue. Camera interruption. Only on the 6th floor. Only during those 7 minutes. The officers came with us to Unit 627. My lock was intact. I opened the door. Everything was gone. Not stolen. Moved. All my boxes, shelves, bags, the rolled rug. Everything had been rearranged into a narrow path. A hallway inside the unit. My belongings stacked on both sides from floor to ceiling, leaving just enough room to walk to the back wall. At the end of the path was a folding chair, unfolded, facing me. On the seat was another receipt. Timestamp, 3:18 a.m. 1 minute before the access log said, "My code exited." At the bottom, "Sit." One of the officers told me to step away. The other took photos. The manager kept saying, "This isn't possible." But it was possible. That was what terrified me. Not supernatural. Not impossible. Just someone with access, patience, and knowledge. Someone who could move through cameras. Someone who could open locks. Someone who could use codes that were supposed to be private. I moved everything out that day. Or tried to. Halfway through, I found a box that wasn't mine. Plain cardboard. No label. It was tucked behind my winter clothes. The officer opened it. Inside were dozens of keys. Not modern keys. Old ones. Apartment keys, padlock keys, mailbox keys, car keys, luggage keys. Some had paper tags. Most didn't. At the bottom of the box was a notebook. Every page had unit numbers, dates, times, short notes. Some were simple. Move box from front to back. Turn lamp on. Left sweater folded. Resident cried in hallway. Others were worse. Stayed inside until closing. Watched through gap. Followed home. Then I saw my old unit number. Next to it, lives alone. Comes late. Notices too much. I felt like I might pass out. The police took the box and notebook. The storage facility shut down the 9th and 6th floors for inspection. They found something behind unit 914 that should not have existed. A maintenance void. A narrow space between rows of units, accessible through a loose panel from an empty unit nearby. Someone could crawl behind several storage rooms and look through small gaps where the metal walls didn't fully meet the floor or ceiling. They found blankets, bottled water, food wrappers, a flashlight, a charging cable, and more photographs. Not just of me, dozens of customers. People opening units, sorting boxes, crying over old belongings, changing clothes behind half-closed doors, making phone calls they thought were private. The police believed someone had been hiding inside the facility after hours, maybe for weeks, maybe months, maybe longer. The manager insisted it had to be a former employee. Someone with access knowledge. Someone who knew camera blind spots and alarm routines. That explanation made sense. It did not make me feel safe. A former employee is still a person, and people can leave a job without leaving a place. They never caught him, or her, or them. That was another thing nobody liked to discuss. The notebook never used a name. No fingerprints came back with anything useful. The access logs were compromised. The cameras failed at convenient times. The building quietly reopened after a few days. Residents were told there had been a security incident. I was offered 2 free months. I canceled my account. For a while, I thought it was over. Then I started receiving emails. Not from the storage company. From random addresses. Each one had no subject. Each one contained a photo of one item I used to keep in storage. My old suitcase. My winter coat, a box of books, a cracked mirror, a lamp. At first, I thought the photos had been taken before I moved out. Then I got one showing my suitcase inside my apartment closet. My current apartment. The closet door was open. The suitcase was exactly where I kept it. The message under the photo said, "You brought the unit home." I changed the locks, installed cameras, called police again. Nothing showed forced entry. Nothing appeared on my cameras, but things kept moving. A box under my bed rotated sideways. A coat pocket turned inside out. A chair in my kitchen pulled back from the table. Nothing stolen. Nothing broken. Just small proof that someone had been there. Then one night, I woke up to a sound from my closet. A soft metal click, like a padlock closing. I turned on the light. The closet door was shut. I knew I had left it open. I stood there for a long time with my phone in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other. Finally, I called 911 and waited in the hallway until officers arrived. They opened the closet. No one was inside, but my suitcase was locked. I had never locked it. The officers cut it open. Inside was a folding chair, collapsed neatly, wrapped in my winter coat. On the seat was a final receipt, not from the storage facility, from a moving company. Pickup location, my old storage building. Delivery location, my apartment. Date, that day. At the bottom, handwritten, no need to visit anymore. I left New York after that. I know that sounds dramatic, but there's a specific kind of fear that makes a city impossible to live in. It's not fear of strangers on the street. It's fear of systems. Keypads, cameras, locks, elevators, storage units, delivery logs, all the things that are supposed to create order. Once you realize a person can learn those systems better than you, use them quietly, and turn your own routines into a map, every door becomes suspicious. I sold most of what I owned, threw out the rest. No storage, no second closet, no boxes of memories hidden somewhere else. Now everything I own fits inside the place where I sleep. People tell me that sounds freeing. It isn't. It just means I no longer trust any locked room I can't see. Sometimes I still get emails. Not often, maybe once or twice a year. No subject, no words, just photos of storage hallways, rows of metal doors, fluorescent lights, a folding chair at the end. I never recognize the facility. I never reply. And every time I pass a self-storage building at night, glowing quietly beside an empty street, I think about all those sealed units inside, all those private things, all those forgotten pieces of people. And I wonder how many are really locked, and how many are being opened after midnight by someone who already knows the code. I worked the overnight front desk at a small hotel in New York for almost 8 months. It wasn't fancy, but it pretended to be. The lobby had marble-looking tile that wasn't real marble, gold light fixtures that were always dusty, and a little seating area no one used unless they were waiting for a rideshare or arguing quietly on the phone. The hotel sat on a busy avenue, squeezed between a closed storefront and a narrow service alley. During the day, it felt normal. Tourists came in dragging luggage. Business travelers complained about early check-in. Couples asked for extra towels, and delivery drivers left food on the front table. At night, it became something else. After midnight, the lobby was mostly empty. The automatic doors opened for no one. The elevator chimed from floors where nobody had called it. Pipes clicked behind the walls. The city kept moving outside, but inside the hotel, every sound seemed too close. I liked the job at first. Most of the shift was quiet. I checked in late arrivals, printed reports, answered occasional calls, and tried not to fall asleep behind the desk. The security guard sat near the entrance until 2 a.m., then left for his second job. After that, it was just me, the cameras, and the building. The first strange thing happened on a Monday night. At 2:17 a.m., the front desk phone rang. I answered with the usual greeting. No one spoke. I could hear breathing on the other end. Then a woman whispered, "The room is cold." I asked for her room number. She didn't answer. I asked again. After a long pause, she said, "There isn't one." Then the call disconnected. I checked the phone display. Internal call. That meant it came from a room. But the system didn't show a room number, just 4 zeros. I stared at it for a few seconds, then told myself it was a glitch. Hotels are full of glitches. Phones call the desk by accident. Old wiring crosses lines. Guests press buttons half asleep. Nothing about it was automatically terrifying, but I still checked the camera feeds. Lobby empty. Hallways empty. Elevators idle. Nothing unusual. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same display. This time, no breathing. Just the sound of someone knocking softly. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 knocks. I said, "Hello?" The knocking stopped. Then the same woman whispered, "He's outside." The line went dead. I called the manager. He didn't answer. I called the security guard, who had just left. He told me to check the occupied room list and see if anyone had called from a blocked extension. I did. Every room was accounted for. Number 0000. No room without a number. The next morning, I wrote it in the overnight log. The day manager read it and laughed. He said the phone system was older than it looked and sometimes displayed bad extensions. He told me not to worry unless a guest came to the desk. That became the official rule. Don't worry unless a guest complains in person. A week later, it happened again. 2:17 a.m. Front desk phone. Internal call. I didn't want to answer, but I had to. This time, the woman said, "He knows I called." Her voice was barely above a whisper. I asked where she was. She said, "Behind the ice machine." Then I heard a man's voice in the background. Calm, muffled, "Open the door." The woman gasped. The call ended. I grabbed the hotel radio and checked the camera feed for every floor with an ice machine. Nothing. The ice machines were at the end of each hallway, tucked into little alcoves beside service closets. Every camera angle showed empty carpet, dim wall sconces, and closed guest room doors. I almost stayed behind the desk. I wish I had. Instead, I took the master key card and went upstairs. The hotel had 9 guest floors. I started at the top and worked down. 9th floor, empty. 8th floor, empty. 7th, empty. By the time I reached the 5th, my hand was sweating around the radio. The hallway was silent except for the hum of the ice machine. I stood near the alcove, listening. Then I heard something from behind it. A sniffle, not from the hallway, from behind the wall. I leaned closer. There was a narrow service door beside the ice machine, painted the same color as the wall. Staff used those closets for plumbing access and supplies. I scanned my key card. The light blinked red. Access denied. That didn't make sense. The night auditor MasterCard opened almost everything. I radioed maintenance. No answer, obviously. It was almost 3 a.m. Then, from behind the service door, someone whispered, "Please don't let him know you heard me." I backed away so fast I hit the opposite wall. The ice machine dropped a fresh load of ice into its bin, and I nearly screamed. I ran back to the elevator and returned to the lobby. From the desk, I called 911. The dispatcher asked if someone was injured. I said I didn't know. She asked if I could see the person. I said no. She asked what room they were in. I said there was no room. I could hear myself sounding less believable with every answer. 2 officers arrived 20 minutes later. I took them to the 5th floor. The service door opened for one of their physical keys after we got the emergency ring from the lockbox. Inside was a narrow maintenance closet. Mops, pipe access, cleaning chemicals. No person, no hidden room, no sign anyone had been there. But on the floor behind a bucket was a white hotel towel, folded neatly. On it, written in pen, were the words, "Thank you for checking." The officers took a photo. One asked if staff ever played pranks. I said not like this. They spoke to the manager the next day. After that, everything became about protecting the hotel from liability instead of finding out what happened. The manager told me not to go upstairs alone for unverified calls. He said if 0000 called again, I should note it and wait. I asked, wait for what? He didn't answer. For almost 2 weeks, 0000 didn't call. Then guests started complaining. A man in 604 said someone knocked on his door at 3 a.m., but when he looked through the peephole, nobody was there. A woman in 812 said she heard crying inside her bathroom wall. A couple in 307 checked out early after finding their room phone unplugged but still ringing. Every complaint happened between 2 o'clock and 3:30 a.m. Every guest described a woman whispering or a man knocking. Management comped a few rooms and blamed old plumbing. Then one night, a guest came down the lobby in bare feet. Adult woman, early 30s maybe. She looked half asleep and terrified. She said, "There's someone in my room." I asked her room number. She said, "I don't know." I asked if she had her key sleeve. She shook her head. I asked her name. She looked confused. Then she whispered, "I'm not checked in." Before I could respond, the elevator behind her opened. She turned toward it and made a sound I will never forget. Not a scream, a small, broken breath. Inside the elevator stood a man in a dark coat, adult, average height, face mostly hidden under a baseball cap. He looked directly at her, then at me. The woman said, "That's him." I reached for the phone. The lobby lights flickered. When they came back, the woman was gone. The elevator doors were closing. The man was still inside. I ran to the elevator and hit the button, but it was already moving up. The panel showed no floor, just a dash. I called police again. This time, the cameras showed something. Not enough, but something. The lobby camera captured the woman standing at the desk. It captured me talking to her. It captured the elevator opening. But the inside of the elevator was blown out with static. The man appeared only as a dark smear. Then the footage skipped. 3 seconds missing. When it returned, the woman was gone. The police searched every floor. Nothing. No guest matched her description. No missing key card. No open rooms. No report of an assault. The detective asked whether the hotel had any unregistered long-term residents. The manager said absolutely not. The night maintenance worker, who had stayed quiet until then, gave him a look. That was when things started coming out. The hotel had old staff corridors behind parts of the building. Not secret tunnels exactly, but service passages used for laundry, plumbing, electrical access, and housekeeping routes. Some were no longer in use. Some were sealed. Some weren't on updated floor plans. And there had once been a room, not a guest room, a small break room or storage room between floors, built into a dead space near the old elevator shaft. No official number, no windows, no guest access. Years earlier, staff supposedly used it to sleep during double shifts. Then something happened. The maintenance worker wouldn't say what. He only said the door had been covered over during renovations. The detective asked where it was. The maintenance worker pointed upward, between 5 and 6. The manager looked furious, but he didn't deny it. The next morning, contractors opened a wall near the 5th floor ice machine. Behind it was a narrow passage, and at the end of that passage was a door. No number, no handle on the hallway side, just a keyhole and layers of old paint. Inside was a room barely big enough for a bed. It had an old mattress, a chair, a dead phone, and a wall vent that connected to the hotel phone system. The room smelled stale, not abandoned, used. On the chair was a stack of guest key sleeves, dozens of them, some recent, some old. On the mattress was a hotel towel folded into a square. Written on it, "You found the wrong room." After that, the hotel closed 2 floors for maintenance. Police came and went. Staff were questioned. Key card logs were reviewed. A former employee became the main suspect, though no one would tell me much. Apparently, he had worked overnight years earlier, knew the old passages, and had been fired after guests complained about him entering rooms without authorization. He disappeared after that, but his old staff profile had been reactivated multiple times. No one knew how, or no one admitted knowing. I quit before they could fire me for being involved. For a month, I heard nothing. Then I got a voicemail from the hotel number at 2:17 a.m. I hadn't worked there in weeks. I played it the next morning. At first, silence. Then the old front desk phone tone. Then the woman's whisper. He changed rooms. The message ended with 3 soft knocks. I blocked the number. A week later, an envelope arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a hotel key card. Plain white. No logo. On the card, someone had written 0000. I took it to the police. They added it to the file. That was all they could do. Months passed. Eventually, I moved out of New York. Not because of the hotel alone, but because something in me changed after that. I couldn't pass a hotel hallway without checking every service door. I couldn't sleep in any room where I didn't know what was behind the walls. The worst part was never knowing who the woman was. Real guest? Former staff? Recording? Trap? Victim? Bait? Sometimes I think she was trying to warn me. Sometimes I think she was part of it. And sometimes, when I remember the way she looked at the man in the elevator, I think she had been running from him for a very long time. A year after I left, I searched the hotel online. It had rebranded. New name, new lobby photos, new reviews. People praised the location, the price, the friendly staff. But buried in the recent reviews was one from a guest who gave 3 stars. The review said the room was fine, but they kept getting calls from the front desk in the middle of the night. When they answered, no one spoke, just breathing. Then a woman whispering that the room was cold. Management replied publicly, apologizing for a phone system error. I closed the page. I didn't leave a comment. I didn't call anyone, because I know what they would say. Old wiring, glitchy phones, thin walls, misunderstanding. New York is full of explanations that almost work. But if you ever stay in an old hotel there, and your room phone rings at 2:17 a.m., don't answer right away. Look at the display first. And if it says 0000, leave the room. Do not check the hallway. Do not call the desk. Do not wait for the knocking. Just leave. Because some rooms don't have numbers. And some guests never checked out.